Made a video around here about Abraham's mother and received a lot of comments from people asking what we can know about Sarai's mother, Abraham's wife, who then renamed Sarah. We even received many questions about curiosities of this couple's life, Abraham and Sarah. And as far as possible, we will make some videos to try to answer these curiosities, and of course, always based on the biblical text. Because there are many materials out there that bring various stories about biblical characters, especially those of premosal time like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but have no reliability. They are only ancient writings that simply report somewhat fanciful events that are not in the Bible and have not been validated by any respected Jewish tradition. So talking about Sarah's mother, the Bible brings no information about who this woman was. In fact, in general, we know very little about Sarah, because the biblical narrative focuses on her life from an adult age. Even the most detailed biblical accounts about Sarah talk about her as an elderly and stereo woman who received from the Lord the promise of being a mother in connection with her husband's call. The Abram to you. So all we know is that her original name was Sarai, and then she was called Sarah, and his name, Sarai, who was later changed to Sarah. He means princess, and many scholars believe this name. It probably had to do with the idolatry of Mesopotamia where Abraham's family dwelt. Some scholars believe that this name was given to Sarai precisely in honor of some worshipped deities in that region. And if this is correct, it may be an indication that Sarai's mother was also a person widely involved in the idolatry of Mesopotamia, like any inhabitant of that region that followed polytheism. But, biblically speaking, we can even to say that Sarah's mother is indirectly quoted in a verse in which Abraham claims that Sarah was her father's daughter, but she was not her mother's daughter. This is there in Genesis 20, verse 12. We also do not know who is Abram's mother, but that statement indicates that she will have been related and had children with more than one woman. At that time, it was common in many cultures that men marry more than one woman or who had concubines. Moreover, of these completely confused family arrangements, many bastard children emerged. In the case of Sarah's mother, it is not possible to know if she was a second wife of Will, have either a concubine, or even a random woman with whom she had only some kind of case. We even know that Abraham had other brothers, Aran and Nahor. But we don't know exactly if these brothers were children of the same mother. That is, it is not impossible for one of those brothers of Abraham to be the son of another woman. Perhaps Sarah's own mother. Anyway, that everything is speculation. But what we can say is that none of the biblical text indicates that Sarah was a daughter to whom she will not recognize. Definitely, the text does not give any margin to assume that Sarah was rejected by her father or something. As has been said, she may not have been a bastard daughter, but a legitimate daughter of a second official marriage of Will. And some people question the fact that Sarah is not cited in the genealogy of Will have in the book of Genesis. But this is only in accordance with the characteristics of most of the genealogical lists of ancient documents, which often cited only male descendants of a given lineage. And another question that always arises is whether apocryphal books or extra-biblical materials say something about Sarah's mother. Well, both apocryphal books and extra-biblical materials also do not explain who Sarah's mother was. In fact, here it is worth remembering that the huge majority of these materials does not have any reliability, not even as a historical source. Many of these writings are completely false, and were produced by authors who lived a long time after biblical texts, so they had nothing to do with the original Bible, at least with the historical context in which biblical events happened. An example of this is Jezar's popular book, which we have even made a video about it here. And in short, this book tries to be a legitimate book of the same name that was lost in biblical times. And the pseudo-book of Jezar does not mention the name of Sarah's mother, but tries to say that her mother did not have a relationship with Abraham's father, but with Abraham's brother, Aram. Jewish historian Flavio Josephus, in his work Jewish Antiquities, also reproduces similar information, and also does not inform the name of Sarah's mother. But although Josephus's work certainly has its historical value, when hasting with the biblical account, the testimony of Scripture, of course, must prevail. Another thing we also need to admit is that not all apocryphal materials are at the same level. Of course, none of them will ever be on an equal footing with Scripture. Of course. But while some apocryphal books deserve no mention, there are others that even have some relevance, at least from the historical point of view. Sometimes because they are really very old or to reproduce some tradition that somehow has had some recognition within culture Jewish. And one of these apocryphal books that has some recognition is the well-known Book of Jubilees, which had a very well-preserved Ethiopian copy to this day. And although this book reports some additional details about the life of Israel's patriarchs, including Abraham himself, although of course these details cannot effectively prove, the Jubilee book does not report Sarah's mother's name. So this book brings additional details to those in the Bible about Abraham's life. And these details, we cannot confirm them. But even so, even though it is a book that brings more details about Abraham's life, it is a book that does not inform Sarah's mother's name. So we can conclude that Sarah's mother's name was not recorded in the Bible. This is a fact. And that name cannot be found in any relatively safe extra-biblical source either. So there is no Jewish tradition that informs Sarah's mother's name, a truly reliable tradition. No other book produced within Jewish culture that has some recognition. So the only thing we can do is admit that we really don't know anything about who Sarah's mother was.